So, very good morning, good afternoon, good evening. So, we are going to discuss particularly today about aggregate reporting. So, what actually happens in the aggregate reporting, what actually we are doing, particularly in pharmacovigilance. So, in earlier sessions, we have discussed about what is expedited reporting, what is ICSR, that is we call individual case safety report. So, if you remember, we have discussed how expedited reporting we are doing, and we are submitting the ICSR to the regulatory authority of particular country. In these sessions, we are going to discuss about aggregate reporting. So, if you see this word carefully, aggregate, we are going to aggregate something. So, what actually we are going to aggregate? We are going to aggregate ICSR, that are individual case safety reports. So that already we have covered in earlier sessions what actually ICSR is, what are the different sources for the ICSR. You can get the report from spontaneous sources, you can get report from clinical trials, you can get report from regulatory authority, you can get reports from literature as well. So, in aggregate reporting, we are collecting these ICSR for particular period of time periods, and we are, making one report, and that report we call aggregate report. So, aggregate reporting, it's a, so every pharmaceutical companies need to establish and demonstrate the benefit and risk of the medicinal product for marketing authorizations. So, you all knows how products are getting into the market. So you have done all the preclinical studies in which you have tested your new chemical entities for safety as well as for efficacies. For examples, you have developed a new chemical entities for treatment of diabetes mellitus. So you have tested that new chemical entities for its efficacy as well as safety under in vitro conditions, animal experimentation studies, and after that you have put it one applications to the regulatory authority to start the clinical trial, and that application be called IND. IND is investigational new drug applications which you are submitting to regulatory authority of particular country to start the clinical trial. If you want to start clinical trial in India, you have to submit your IND applications to regulatory authority of India, that is your CDSCO. If you want to start a clinical trial in US, so you have to submit your IND applications to US FDA. So these regulatory authority will assess your applications, and that applications you have included all the data with respect to safety and efficacies. And so if everything goes fine, everything is okay, so obviously you will get the approval to start the clinical trial. And after conducting of all the clinical trials, now again you have to submit another applications, and that applications we call NDA, new drug applications, to the regulatory authority of particular country where you want to market the product. So, so regulatory authorities is assessing your informations, whatever you are submitting in the NDA. So you are submitting your information related to safety of that product as well as the efficacy. So regulatory authority will assess it, and you all knows there is nothing which is safe in nature. Everything has their adverse effects. So whatever adverse effects we are getting in a clinical trial, we are documented it, we are submitting to the regulatory authorities, and regulatory authority assessing the medicinal product with respect to its risk and benefit profile. So obviously, when your risks are less and benefits are more, you will get the market approval for that XYZ molecules. So the product is authorized if benefits are more as compared to the risk. You can see, but this balance, this risk and benefit profile, or this risk and benefit balance, valid at a given point of time, but may change once the drug reach in the market. So obviously, when your NDA has approved, so your risks are less, benefits are more. That's why you got the market approval. That's why your NDA application has been approved by the regulatory authority for the marketing of your product. But whatever you are getting in a clinical trials, it can be differ what you are going to get in the market. And why it is so? Why there is a need of post marketing studies, even though you are testing your molecule in the clinical trial. So question can be raised, Because in clinical trial, I have already tested the safety and efficacy of the drug in human. So why there is a need of post-marketing surveillance? And aggregate reporting, whatever we are discussing is, we are discussing post-marketing surveillance. It's the one of the part of post-marketing surveillance. So the answer to this question is, the reason why there is a need to do the post-marketing surveillance or to do the pharmacovigilance, because whatever you have observed in a clinical trial, you have the clinical trial have their own limitations. And what are their limitations? They have a limited number of patients. You can't test large number of the patients safety and efficacy of your product, right? You can't include all the populations in your clinical trial. Is it possible? No. In actual practice, it's not possible. You are taking the samples, so you are testing your safety and efficacy data, which you are getting in the clinical trial, you are getting in a limited number of patients. If you see the clinical trial carefully, you will find that in their protocol, there is a strict inclusion and exclusion criteria. So when there is a strict inclusion and exclusion criteria, so you are going to exclude particularly number of types of other patients as well, the patients who are suffering from comorbid conditions. For examples, as I given the example of anti-diabetic, you have developed a molecule for management of diabetes mellitus, and so you done the clinical trials. So in clinical trial, obviously you want the patients who have diabetes only. In particularly, if we talk about phase 2 clinical trial. But when we talk about phase 3, you have little bit lose your inclusion and exclusion criteria. You have included the patients with diabetes as well as hypertension as well. But is it possible to include all the types of patients with diabetes? Because diabetes can result in various complications, various other comorbid conditions the patients can also suffer. So is it possible to include all the comorbid conditions in clinical trial? No. Right? But once your drug reach in the market, so that drug is going to be consumed by the patients of the diabetes with hypertension, with rheumatoid arthritis, with multiple sclerosis, with Alzheimer's disease, with peptic ulcers, and so many. There are so many diseases. So the effects which you will get in clinical trials and effects which you are getting from the market, there can be a difference. And that is one of the possibility, one of the reasons why you will get the different effects with respect to risk and benefit profile of the medicines when drug is reached in the market. That is we call, and of course, if the patient is suffering from different comorbid conditions, so obviously patient is using other drugs as well. If there is a patient with rheumatoid arthritis and using anti-diabetic medications, so the patient is also using anti-rheumatoid arthritis patient, also using anti-rheumatoid drugs. So there can be a drug-drug interactions possibility as well, which you can't observe in a clinical trial. Long-term exposure, you can't see, because clinical trials, you have a time window as well. You can't run your clinical trial for 20, 25 years. No. So long-term effects only you can observe when the drug is in the market. Confounding factors, we have already discussed, right? There are a number of confounding factors which you can't consider in a clinical trials. And uncontrolled conditions. Uncontrolled conditions, I can give you example. For examples, when we are doing a clinical trial, everything is defined. Diet, what diet I have to provide to the volunteers or subjects. What, means, so everything is controlled. Diet pattern is controlled. Your waters, your all things are controlled. So you are getting the effect of the medicine in a controlled environment in a clinical trials. But once drug reach in the market, there is nothing is controlled. Patients are consuming so many things. Some are using, so with drugs, they are getting some herbal, some are using multivitamins, some are, so getting the non-vegetarian diet, their diet differences, their genetic differences, there are so many differences. So you are not controlling anything when drug reach in the market. So whatever the effects you are getting in a controlled environment, obviously, once the drug reach in the market, the uncontrolled, you will get a different effects. So these are the reasons why there is a need for the pharmacovigilance or aggregate reporting particularly. So in aggregate reporting, as I said, we are collecting the ICSR for the fixed interval of time, and then we are making a reports, and that reports we call aggregate report. And example of aggregate report is PSUR. PSUR stands for Periodic Safety Update Reports. So as per regulatory countries, as per the regulatory authority of each and every country, you have to submit these reports. Obviously, if we talk about globally, so maybe regulatory authority of US FDA, US FDA is asking you to submit report quarterly basis, whereas India can ask you to submit the report 6 monthly basis. EU can ask you to submit the report with different time frame. So across the globe, time frame can be different, but you have to be prepare this report and submit to the regulatory authority at fixed time intervals. That we call periodic safety update report. So once you got the marketing authorizations or you have launched your product in the market, your timeline is going to start. So as I said, if you are going to market your product in India, so first 2 years you have to submit your report 6 monthly basis. After that, you have to submit annually, right? So you can see in this picture, for examples, you have launched your product in 2024. So in 2025, if your regulatory authority is asking you to submit annually or 6 monthly, depends upon that, you have submitted your first periodic safety update report to the regulatory authority. So these blue, you can see that this is representing the percentage of benefit. Red ones are presenting percentage of risk. So your benefits are more, your risk are less. Then you have submitted second one as per the time frame of that particular regulatory authority. Then you have submitted third one, then you have submitted fourth one. So these risk and benefit profile, which you can see at the first, when you have submitted your first PSUR, it can be changed over the time. So you can see that your percentage of benefit can be decreased, your percentage of risk can be increased. So that regulatory authority has to take the decisions whether this risk versus benefit profile is favorable for this particular uh, conditions or particular indications, or we have to take the decisions why this percentage of benefit is going to reduce and why percentage of risk is more. So this is we call aggregate reporting. So there have been many drugs which were initially found to be very successful in a number of patients, but unfortunately were later found to have a serious adverse effect which you have not identified in the clinical trial. And due to these serious side effects, these drugs have been withdrawn from the market. Few of the example you can see that amphetamine, it is withdrawn from the markets Canada due to increased risk of stroke. Proxifene, increased risk of heart attack. Dofetilide, prolonged QT intervals. Lorcaserin, increased risk of cancer in US 2020 has been withdrawn, right? So that means these serious adverse effects you have not observed in a clinical trial, but when you have analyzed the post-marketing data, sometimes student can ask the questions of why this particular drug is withdrawn in one country but still continue in the another country. Why it is so? So it can be due to pharmacogenetic differences, some serious adverse effect you can observe in a particular type of populations, but you can't observe in another type of populations, right? So thus to enhance patient safety, public health, and periodic re-examinations, you have to be re-examine what you have to re-examine. You have to re-examine benefit and risk balance, and that is needed to ensure the balance remains in the favorable conditions. And this periodic re-examinations is performed in a one document, and that document we call PSUR. So in every pharmacovigilance department, whether that is pharmacovigilance is doing by the CROs or pharmaceutical companies or KPO, whatever, they have a separate team for the aggregate reporting, or we call it aggregate reporting team. And what these teams are doing? These teams are preparing these PSUR. They are doing the analysis of all the ICSR, putting in a one document, making a one report, and these report you have to be right as per the regulatory guidelines. So in upcoming sessions, we are going to discuss various sections of the PSUR as well. But before that, what is the history of this PSUR? So we can see that many times we have discussed, there are two tragedies which are happens with respect to pharmacovigilance. Everyone should know. One is sulfanilamide tragedies. And in recent news, you all might have seen that the many children have been died due to cough syrup. So this is the tragedies which is related to one of the solvent which have produced the toxicities, and that solvent name is ethylene glycol. So what actually happened is during 1930, sulfanilamide is very good antibacterial drugs has been discovered and it get the market approval. But problem with sulfanilamide was it's bitter in taste. So particularly pediatric populations is getting a difficulty to take sulfanilamide because its taste is very bitter. So what the company has done, company has converted this sulfanilamide into the elixirs. And to make it elixirs, they have used one solvent, and that vehicle or solvent is ethylene glycol. And it has been unfortunate, it's very unfortunate incident. After consumption of this, many children have been died. And after the investigation, it has been found that the children have been died due to the toxicity of ethylene glycol. Sulfanilamide was safe, but ethylene glycol, which was used to prepare the elixirs for the pediatric population, children have been died. And that incident led to 1938 Food, Drug and Cosmetic Acts in the United States. Then another tragedy is when we talk about pharmacovigilance is thalidomide. Everyone uh, might heard about thalidomide. It's a very wonderful drugs. So it has been uh, considered as OTC as well. So pregnant women are consuming it for their morning sickness. And what unfortunately is the women who have consumed this thalidomide, it results in various birth defects in the children. Many children have been born with the birth defects. Some children don't have a limb, short limbs. So all the children's, so the women who have consumed the thalidomide, the children have been born with the birth defects. And that is the biggest medical tragedies. And there is no single case in the US. And the reason why US don't have a single case of thalidomide tragedies because during that time company has submitted NDA application to US FDA as well. I forget the name of the ladies in the US FDA who has denied the approval of thalidomide in the US populations. Got it? So in US population, just give me 1 second. Yeah, sorry. So, sir, there is no single case in US that's highlight the importance of regulatory authorities. Regulatory authority has to consider all the points, and if they have a doubt, they have a right to deny the approval. So that ladies in the US FDA has denied the approval of thalidomide in the US, and due to that, there is no single case of thalidomide in US. But in EU, there are a number of cases, and that's the biggest medical tragedies which are happened. And these are the tragedies which have highlighted the importance of pharmacovigilance or aggregate reportings. There is another serious adverse event experienced by the patients in the UK study of TGN 1412 in 2006, which led to changes in the regulations of phase 1 testing of drugs. And this is particularly, when in experimental studies, you have not find any serious adverse event with this molecule TGN 1412. But when they have started the phase 1 clinical trial in healthy volunteers, all the volunteers have got the serious reactions. And that is due to their immunological reactions, which you have not observed in the animals. So these highlighted the importance of these pharmacovigilance. So there is a concept of safety report. Marketing drug is raised from the working group to CIOMS. I hope you all know CIOMS, Council for International Organization of Medical Sciences, which have created the basis for the ICH E2C for the industries. ICH is International Conference, but now we call it International Council. when first ICH is formed, that will be called international conference. If someone asks you international conference, is it an international conference or council? So you have to answer earlier. When it was established, it was international conference, but now it's international council. So format, content of PSUR, concept of international birth date, all each and everything has been defined in ICH E2C document. So aggregate reporting, when we talk about aggregate reporting, all are PSUR, but there are different names according to the reasons. So PSUR, periodic safety update reports, we are submitting to the developing countries. PEBRAR is your periodic benefit risk evaluation report. So I can expand it. Uh, PEBRAR is periodic benefit risk evaluations report. PEBRAR. And PEBRAR, we also call it a PSUR for EU region. Got it? If someone talk about PSUR for EU region, European Union, so that is a PEBRAR. Or you can call it a PEBRAR or you can call it a PSUR. In upcoming sessions, we are going to understand what is the difference between PSUR and the PEBRAR or PSUR for the EU regions. And PADR is periodic adverse drug experience report. And this is again an aggregate report which we are submitting to US FDA, right? And ADCO is addendum to clinical overview, which we are submitting during the renewal of the medicinal product. During renewal of medicinal product, we are using this ADCO. So ADCO is another uh, your aggregate reports which we are submitting to the regulatory authorities when you are going to submit the applications for the renewal of your product. So again, I am repeating, there is a PSUR, periodic safety update report. There is a PEBRAR. PEBRAR is particularly for the EU. PADR, that will be called periodic adverse drug experience report, which we are submitting to the US FDA. ADCO, amendment to clinical overview, which we are submitting during the renewal of medicinal products. So what are the basic principles of the PSUR? So there are some basic principles which are applicable for all. So main focus of PSUR should be the presentations, analysis, and evaluations of new or changing safety data received during the period covered by the PSUR, providing a basis for the conclusion of whether further investigations or changes in the SMPC, particularly we are using the word SMPC when we talk about EU, we are using the word PI, that is the product information, when we talk about US FDA. So that will be necessary or not. So that is the one of the basic principles. And single PSUR, single report you have to submit for the different formulations. For examples, you have a product, uh, uh, for any drugs you can name. For example, albendazole, you have in tablets, you have in capsules, you have in injections. So now question is whether you have to submit separate PSUR for the tablet, separate PSUR for capsules, separate PSUR for injections. So answer to this question is no. There is no need to submit separate PSUR for the different formulations. You have to submit single PSUR for all the formulations. But of course, when you are writing the PSUR, in that one you have to mention that this product is available in these different types of the formulations. Then second is dosage form. So dosage form, again, if your product is in a different dosage form, you have to submit the single PSUR for all. Similarly, for the indications, so one product can have a more than one indications. For example, a product is approved for diabetes, it's approved for another one as well. So you have to be, so you have to submit the single PSUR, whenever, whatever it is. Means there is no need to submit the separate PSUR for one indications and then another indication, then another indications for same medicinal product. No, you have to submit in a single PSUR for all the indications. But of course, within the PSUR, data need to be presented separately. You have to be present separately for the different formulations, different dosage form, different indications. Now, frequency and submission timing of PSUR, you have to submit as per the regulatory requirement. Gaps are not allowed and overlapping should be avoided. So, as per the regulatory requirement, as I said, I have given you the examples. For examples, today you got the market approval, right? Today is 14th November 2025, right? And XYZ regulatory authority is asking you to submit the PSUR annually, right? So 13 November 2026, right? So your reporting interval will be 1 year. If your regulatory authority is asking whenever your product is approved for the marketing, you have to submit every 6 months. So your reporting intervals will be 6 months instead of 1 year, right? And this is your starting date, and this date, particularly this date, be sorry. So particularly this date and date up to which you are going to include the data, we called it DLP. DLP is your data lock point. You might heard about this term, data lock point. So what is data lock point? Data lock point is your end date of your report. So according to the regulatory authorities, you have to decide the reporting intervals, you have to decide the frequencies, and gaps are not allowed. For example, if you are submitting 13th November 2026 up to this, right? For example, you are submitting your 13th November 2026. So next PSUR reporting interval will be going to start from 14th November 2026. You can't do the gap. You can't submit means from 16th November. So there is a gap. So that gaps are not allowed as per the regulatory requirements. You have to be careful. You should not provide any gap. Gaps are not allowed and overlapping should be avoided. You can't make reporting intervals. First, your reporting interval is 14 November 2025 to 13 November 2026. And next PSUR, you are deciding your reporting interval from 10th November. So there is overlapping. Already you have covered the data up to 13th November. Now you are again going to start from 10th November 2026. So there is overlapping of 3 days, right? So that also you have to be avoided. Gaps are not allowed, overlapping should be avoided. Another important point, another basic principle already discussed, if your product is available in different formulations, as I said, your product is available in tablet, your product is available in capsules, same API. So in that case, there is no need to prepare a separate PSUR for tablet, separate PSUR capsule. You have to prepare single PSUR, and in that PSUR, you have to describe about these formulations, right? Then these are the different sections of the PSUR which I am going to discuss with you. When we talk about PSUR, not PSUR for EU region. These are the sections not for the PSUR for the EU region. Be careful. These are the PSUR which we are submitting particularly to the developing countries. So these sections, you can see that there are only 10 sections. When we talk about PSUR for EU regions or PEBRAR, you will find there are 20 section reports. So that is the major difference between PSUR for EU region that we call PEBRAR or PSUR for other countries. What are the different sections of the PSUR as per the regulatory authorities? So these sections have been defined by the regulatory authorities of particular countries. If we talk about ICH, you will find in earlier format ICH E2C R1, you will find these are the 10 section report. After that, it has been revised and become 20 section report. So what are the different sections? So first, you understand simple report. Then one by one, we are going to discuss about PEBRAR or PSUR for EU region. So first section is about introductions, where you have to introduce about your medicinal product. Then second section is about MAS, that is your marketing authorization status of your molecules. Means in that sections you have to write currently in how many countries your product has been approved. in currently how many formulations are there in the market, how many strengths are there in the market. So if you have formulations in tablet forms, so maybe in tablets you have a three strength, you have a 10 mg, 20 mg, 40 mg. So you have to be include marketing authorization status in the section 2. You also mentions when you got the first marketing approval in any country, that we call international birth date. You have to mentions about if anything, any countries, if your product has been withdrawn, you have to mentions about that one as well. So that will complete your marketing authorization status of your molecules. Then third section is about update of actions taken for safety reasons. So in these sections, you have to mention what actions has been taken by the regulatory authorities or ethics committees or drug safety boards on that molecules with respect to safety reason, if there is any. So you have to compile that information in section 3. So for these sections, you have to go through different websites. In upcoming sessions, we are going to discuss from where you will get that information, how to compile it. But now you just understands what are the different sections. Fourth section is about changes to RSI. That will be called reference safety information. So reference safety informations can be your SMPC. As I told you, SMPC is summary of product characteristics when we talk about EU. We are using PI, product information, when we talk about US, right? So reference safety information, in simpler word, this is the information which is compiled in a document during the clinical trial. So during the clinical trial, whatever you got, what is mechanism of action, adverse effect, contraindications. So, there is a leaflet. In layman terms, we called it PIL, Patient's Information Leaflet. SMPC is the scientific documents as that of the PIL. So if there is any changes has been happened, if you have revised your RSI and you have revised within the reporting intervals, so in these sections, you have to mention what changes you have done, what section has been updated. So you have to compare old RSI with the current RSI. If there is no change within the reporting intervals, so in that case, in these sections, you have to mention one paragraph that this particular RSI, updated RSI you have used, and there is no changes has been done so far. So next section is about estimated patient exposure. So you have to calculate the patient exposure. And to calculate the patient exposure, what is required? You need the sale data of that particular molecules. And patient exposure, you can calculate in the three terms. PT by, that is we call patient treatment years. PTC, that we call patient treatment course. PTD, that we call patient treatment days. PTY is your patient treatment years. So if you see in upcoming sessions, we will discuss about how to calculate the PTY, how to calculate PTC and PTD. But up to this, I can just tell you, when you are preparing a PSUR for the drugs which you are going to use for lifestyle disorders, so you are calculating the patient exposure in terms of PT by. If you are, using the products for, for such kind of drugs which you are using for a particular course, then you are calculating the patient exposure in PTC, like antibiotics. You have a particular course of the treatment. PTD, we are calculating the patient exposure when we are preparing a document for the drugs which you are going to use for 1 day, 2 days, like, proton pump inhibitors, anti-allergic, or some kind of medicines which you are using for a very limited period of time. So in that case, we are calculating the patient exposure in terms of PTD, that is the patient treatment days. Section 6 is about presentation of ICH. ICH is individual case histories. So in that one, you have to present about the ICH, and you have to include the comments by the medical reviewers about that ICH as well. Then you have to, in section 7, if there is any studies which are conducted on your medicinal product for which you are preparing this PSUR. If there is any other informations, you have to compile in the section 8. Section 9, overall safety evaluations, and followed by the conclusions. And appendices which you have to attach with this 10 section PSUR is, Appendix 1 is about worldwide marketing authorization status, including CCDS. CCDS is a company core data sheet. So some companies are using CCDS, some call it RSI, some SMPC, some PI. So it's all are the RSI. Then detailed line listings and summary tabulation. Line listings we are generating by using the softwares. The well-known software is Argus. By Argus, you can generate the line listings. There is Cleanavo is also there. PVNet is also there. So you have to generate the line listings and you have to attach it as appendix. And along with line listings, you have to attach your ST. ST we call summary tabulations. So this is about aggregate reporting, particularly what actually the aggregate reports and why it's important, what are the different sections of the PSUR. If you have any questions, you can ask. Okay, so this is all about PSUR. Thank you.